I just want to remind you that everyone that you admire had to start somewhere. The people that you look up to for their art or poetry or movies or books, they all had to start somewhere. And if you're currently sat at home listening to this and thinking to yourself, I wish I was putting myself out there the same way that they are, I just want to ask you, why are you not? Now, I think for a lot of us, the hardest thing is the fear of judgment and the fear of being seen. This is something that I definitely think is very prominent across any space, but particularly the creative space, because everything you're creating or writing or putting together or producing is so vulnerable, and it all reflects a deeper part of you. And that can be scary because you're not just putting out something you've made into the world, you're putting out a piece of yourself into the world. And that kind of exposure can be a terrifying thing. But if you feel cool to be putting yourself out there like that, then I think learning to let go of the fear of judgment and the fear of being seen is going to be your best friend. I think sometimes as well we can have a almost worry around the idea of taking up space, the not good enough mindset, not as good as this person is, I'm not as cool as this person is, like, oh, but I haven't perfected my craft yet. I think sometimes as well we can kind of question whether we should be putting it out there when we're comparing ourselves to other people, because we aren't at the same stages that the people we admire are at, where they have been doing this for years or decades and they seem to know exactly who they are in this creative space. I think sometimes being young and wanting to put things into the world can be an especially scary thing, because we have had so few years on this earth that we are so actively discovering who we are. So when we look up to these people that have been doing it for years and years and years on top of us and see how put together they all are, we can kind of feel discredited because we aren't in that place yet. But realistically, like, I'm also not 35 years old and been doing this for decades. I'm 22. I am just doing this because I enjoy it and I want to see where it goes. It's important to remember that these people we look up to had to start somewhere as well. They were also sat in their room one day and decided, hey, fuck it, let's put my stuff out into the world. Because they had this knowledge that the worst that would happen is nothing comes of it. The best that would happen is what is happening now, which is kind of a question to ask yourself. Why are you so afraid of putting yourself out there creatively and expressing yourself creatively where people can see you? You are allowed and entitled to take up the space that you've been given on this earth. Put your shit out there. I also do believe that a lot of the time, the best things in life really are on the other side of discomfort, that it kind of takes a middle ground of change or being uprooted to get to these really good things. I don't know why that is. I don't know whether that's just like the universe or some higher power, or whether it's just pure coincidence, but I truly do believe that discomfort often brings a lot of goodness with it, because through discomfort you change a lot, and change is always a good thing. I don't think change has ever been entirely negative. One of the things that kind of keeps me creating and keeps me putting out into the world is the fact that all the people that I view as really fucking cool are all doing that kind of thing. They're putting out their art, they're putting out their words, their opinions, whatever, and they're such sick people. And then I think back to the fact that, hey, one day they were just sat alone in their bedroom, they kind of just had this idea to put it out into the world, and then I'm like, hey, I'm in that position now, so who knows what I could be in 10 years time like these guys. I don't know. And even if it went nowhere, it's still just so cool knowing that you're giving yourself the permission and freedom to actually express yourself in something that you enjoy doing and you want to put out into the world. It's cool. It's kind of like nurturing your inner child a bit. Like, you can create, you're allowed to take up space, you're allowed to put your art and your perspective and your work into the world, and it is allowed to be enjoyed in the same way it's also allowed to be hated. But I think that's the beauty of art, is like how art is received. So subjective. Again, I feel like that's reason enough to kind of say who gives a fuck what people think of me doing this. Because I know people are going to hate it. I know people are going to love it, but the same goes for literally all of the best art pieces in history. Who cares at the end of the day? Because at the end of the day, you're going to die in your bed by yourself, and you aren't going to be thinking back to, oh, like, did people like hate this thing that I created when I was 20? Did people hate this thing I created when I was 28? No, you're going to be laying there thinking how sick it was that you had the courage to put yourself out there at that age. And then you'll be like reminded of all these people that you met through this journey and through you putting yourself out there. I also think the fear of failure is a huge reason that people don't put themselves out there, and I definitely think I've been there. So for those of you that don't know me from Instagram, I do travel content, a little bit of lifestyle, a little bit of travel. I kind of want to get into fashion content, but we're gonna see. But anyway, this travel content, I started working with a company to host group trips, and the first group trip that I ever launched, I actually didn't successfully sell. I had this lesson of like really public failure, and I realized that it didn't feel like a bad thing. I was actually so proud of myself for putting myself out there and doing something that scared me, because it was something that I loved. And now a year on, and I sold out a group trip to Costa Rica. I'm about to go on a trip to India. I have another trip in Vietnam in June, and it's kind of crazy that this like one failure has kind of then stemmed onto all of these incredible trips. Sometimes life kind of does just want you to learn how to fail in the field before it takes you to that next step, I guess, just to see how you would receive it. And I think how you view failure is a huge thing when it comes to putting yourself out there, because if you view failure as a really negative thing and you use it as a way to like beat yourself up and hold yourself back, then you're never going to go further. But if you can see failure as a kind of step back and a tool to help you reassess how to move further forwards, it can be an amazing thing. Truly, genuinely think that failure is one of the most powerful things that we can experience as human beings. I just almost dropped my hot water bottle. It's so chilly and my phone's dying and my everything's wobbling. I don't know. I kind of just think that we as humans have a really weird relationship with judgment and with failure, when in reality those two like seemingly really negative things are actually just kind of not really that real. Like, obviously failure does exist, but the negative connotations it holds I don't necessarily think is correct, because I think failure a lot of the time is a beautiful thing. It's honestly been in some of my biggest failures that I've then had like my biggest jumps on in that same area. It kind of just, I don't know, I just truly think that failure is a lot less scary than success, in the sense that it gives you more to keep going for, and it also teaches you way more, and I feel like you find yourself a little bit more in failure, and I think it does just get you further than success, because if you keep succeeding you kind of just never have growth points, you just kind of keep riding the wave. But if you fail you kind of dig a bit deeper and you find more, and I don't know, I don't think failure should have as negative connotations, and fear of other people judging you, I just hold yourself. Just remind yourself you're allowed to take up space, and that people are going to have opinions the same way that you're going to have opinions, and people are entitled to those opinions, but it doesn't mean that you need to let it affect you or how you perceive yourself or how you perceive the stuff that you're putting out into the world. We're all here to take up our space, and you're allowed to do the same. You're allowed to give yourself the same space and time that you give other people, and you're allowed to cheer yourself on the same way that you see yourself cheering on these people that you admire for doing the thing you want to do. Just fucking do it. Life is so short. Don't let not putting your art out into the world be your biggest regret. And regardless, either way, you are going to change, you're going to meet new friends, you're going to get a new job, you're going to probably move to a new city or town or new country. Change happens, change is inevitable. So rather than just riding the wave of discomfort the whole time, decide to lean into it and change for the better. Take a step in a scary direction just to see what happens, because the change is going to come anyway. So why not have some kind of control over it? I don't know. I just think that fear of judgment is such a tough thing for creatives or artists or people generally to get through. But I think on the other side of it, there's so much beauty, and you truly never know who your art is going to affect or change in a really positive way, even if it's just one person. And that's also another thing, like, you aren't putting your art out there just for millions of people to see it. Really, if it changes one person, then it was kind of worth it. The whole thing was sort of worth it. So if your worry is that it's not going to reach many people, maybe it only needed to reach 1 or 2 people, and that's enough. And even if the only person that your art reached was you, that is still enough, because you are just as important as all of these because you are still just as important as all of those individual people that are viewing your art and feeling that way too. I don't know, maybe just let creating be your healing space. And if you find putting it out into the world to be a release, then why hold yourself back from that? Because you really don't know what's going to come from it, first of all. And second of all, literally isn't even going to matter in that much time anyway. So either way it goes. The worst that could happen is that it goes absolutely nowhere, which is still an amazing thing, because you have given yourself the space to put your art into the world, and you have still in some way impacted people, whether yourself, your family, your friends, whoever. But then the best thing that could happen is that you end up being able to lean into this creative space so much more, and something that you want comes from it. Truly is a situation where there are no negatives. That was kind of all I wanted to touch on today. It's maybe a little bit shorter, but if you've been thinking about putting something out there, whether that's on Instagram, TikTok, or just on a little blog or something that only you have the link to, maybe this is your sign to take that step and just see what happens.